stairs. As a 10-year-old, I eavesdropped on my father telling his harrowing tale of almost being gassed to death. In darkness, I sat on the top of the steps. Lights hung over the first 2 steps. I pushed my head forward to hear him better. I listened to my father's somber voice as he sat with friends in the living room below and spoke in his thick, dramatic accent. I sat within a few yards of my father, but totally out of his sight. If anyone started to climb the stairs, within a second I could escape to the safety of my bedroom. I listened, I concentrated, and I memorized his words as if I knew one day after he was gone, it would be my duty to pass them on. He spoke them in English, Polish, Yiddish, or a mixture of all 3, depending on his audience preference. His old friends sat quietly, as silent as falling snow. Many of them had not seen my father since before the war. Many were fellow survivors with numbers tattooed on their arm and memories permanently burned into their brain. As invited guests, they allowed my father, the doctor, to speak first. He captured my mind with unimaginable horrors. They never interrupted him, being too polite or afraid to ask any questions they may not have wanted to hear the answers to. I also sat in silence, listening, fidgeting, and wondering. My father never told me his story directly to me. I thought he wanted to protect me, but I believe he knew I was perched on top of the steps. 30 years later, I again heard my father's voice tell the story, this time resonating from the speakers of a cassette recorder. My dad had died of a heart attack one day before his unedited Holocaust memorial tape arrived via mail to his Boca Raton home. I ripped open the envelope. I popped open the cassette player window, pushed the tape in the slot, and pressed the play button. For the next 3 hours, I sat transfixed. I listened, I remembered, I cried. The interviewer asked, "Doctor, when you were a slave at Auschwitz, what was your most harrowing moment?" My father said, "There were too many frightening moments to count. I don't know how or why I survived. But here is one miraculous moment that I have often told my closest friends. It started during morning roll call on a cold, rainy day. My constant pangs of hunger retreated as the metallic taste of fear crossed my bleeding gums. An SS doctor determined that I would no longer fit to work. Therefore, I had to die. At gunpoint, I and a few other men were marched into a group of new arrivals. Mothers held their babies and young children. Elderly couples walked hand in hand. Crowded into the courtyard, I faced what the Nazis termed the delousing showers. Having lived in, or better said, survived in an extermination camp, I knew all of us were going to be gassed to death. In those showers, I had been told by men who brought the bodies to the ovens. I smelled the putrid odor of burning human flesh. The stench permeated my nostrils, as well as the entire camp. Smoke rose from the chimneys of the crematoria. Ashes of the silenced snowed down upon those selected to live. I knew most of my family had been murdered. Death stopped appearing to be my enemy. Having already descended to hell, I wondered if there was a heaven. I, with over 1,000 other people, were ordered to strip. I unbuttoned my blue and gray striped camp shirt. Sewn on the pocket was a yellow 6-pointed star. In the middle of the star, as if the star alone was not a sufficient symbol, one word pointed out my religious identity: Jude. The reason for my incitement summed up in one 4-letter word. I dropped my trousers, which were encrusted with filth and the stains of death. I folded my soaked, so-called pajamas on top of my wooden-heeled shoes. As my fingers grazed the Star of David, a sharp, burning, electrical jolt shot through my body and crushed my heart. As the pain subsided, I used my hands to cover my privates. I was surrounded by the naked. I wept as I listened to the cries of babies. I shuffled towards the gas chamber. I looked into the dark, smoke-filled skies as rain battered on my face. I prayed the Shema Yisrael. As I wondered about the existence of the Almighty, I glanced over at the perimeter of the crowd and saw a Nazi guard holding a rifle in the direction of the throng. The guard talked to my closed lover, my girlfriend. The guard screamed and pointed the rifle at me. "You vermin, get out of line, Ross!" I had known that if I paused for a second, it would be my last. I hurried to find my clothes and the shoes among the 1,000 piles. Miraculously, they appeared. I questioned my luck. I would be allowed to survive in hell for another day. In seconds, I dressed, stepped out of formation, and turned my back on 1,000 naked people being led to a gas chamber. I feared looking back. As I sat at my father's table in his Boca Raton home, my ears felt the interviewer's silent pause as she absorbed what she had just heard. Trembling, I gently pressed the off button. I had heard enough. I shut my eyes and returned to my 10th year. I found myself in my childhood home, in the hallway, hunched over the top stair, wishing my father had been less protective.